Hello, everyone. I'm Eric. Sorry to interrupt Mountain Talk. We're going to be talking about public health mapping for a little bit here. So we're talking about a project called Health Atlas. We did this with the University of California, San Francisco, UCSF. The URL is right there, healthatlas.ucsf.edu. There's also a QR code here if you're interested. What is the Health Atlas? So we worked with the UCSF group, Population Health and Health Equity, and it maps mountains of data around public health, around 120 variables. It includes health outcomes in addition to other factors that can impact health. So they take a more holistic view of public health than you might be used to, perhaps. And the data is available at both small and large scale within the US. Here are some of the categories for the data that's included: demographic, socioeconomic, environment, health, and healthcare. We also give users a way to slice through the data in different ways, themes if they're interested, such as climate and children and heart disease. And the data sources, wide variety of data sources, although a lot of the data, as you might imagine, demographic and socioeconomic, come from the US Census Bureau, mostly ACS data. We also include data from the CDC, EPA, lots of other researchers, organizations. And the guiding principles for this project are to give users a way to view one variable or two variables and compare them, export that data. Since the data is coming from a lot of different sources, it's pretty handy to be able to export that data and use it on your own. It's already collected. And we also, from the administrative side of things, we wanted to limit server-side work, mostly make things static and easy to maintain. And here's the timeline. So in 2019, we started work on this project, and it was originally only for California data. And that was middle to end of 2019. And then obviously COVID happened early 2020, and we were able to be responsive and add a bunch of COVID data to compare to all of the other variables that we were including. Since then, we've been adding lots of new data as it has come up, including redlining maps and updating the census vintage to 2020 geographies. And finally, in 2024, we've been working on expanding the project to the whole country. And Kelsey's going to talk through some of the design process we went through.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. So I think before we show you the final product, which is live on that QR code if you scanned it earlier, I think it's worth exploring how we do some of this work, how we go from the idea to the polished interface that we have today, because it is quite a process. As Eric mentioned, the tool existed already before we started this kind of redesign this year. And it looks something more like this. This is a sketch, though, of that tool, so we can start iterating and changing it when we take that California data national. So we start by sketching in a design tool, and here we use Figma and FigJam. You'll see more of that in a second. To think through what features should be included, what features that existed, should they stay, should they be updated in some ways to make them more user-friendly, or what things are missing that we might want to add, and where do they go in the interface. These are pretty low to medium fidelity just because things will be moving and changing a lot, and you don't want to spend a lot of time polishing something that will change. But you'll see as we go, things get a little more detailed. So we take those prototypes, and as we add some polish to them and make them look a little more presentable, we in this project had the luxury of doing user testing. So because this was a tool that already existed, we talked to 6 beta users, a couple of whom have used the tool before and have, things about it that they like, things about it that could be better. So it was great to be able to talk to them. I talked to each of them for like an hour, and we went through and I watched them as they used the tool and used the prototype of the new version with the redesign. And then we also sent out 2 written surveys that had some prompts that users were meant to follow and give feedback and answer questions, or just explore on their own with whatever their individual use case might be. And we had about 70 beta testers who did this process and gave us really useful feedback, which you can see summarized here. This really helps us validate the design direction before we get too far, in the implementation process, and shows us, where we have room for improvement as we continue to iterate through the design. Following user testing, we coded the results to identify some common themes. You don't want to change the whole thing based on one person's feedback, but some things come up over and over again, so it's good to make sure those are highlighted as the high priority things to work on, which is what you see here. And you'll see a lot of that propagated into the final design that we'll talk about in a second. But in general, our users are pretty interested in data. It's a lot of researchers, so they want to see as much specific information as possible. And they really like being able to interact with the map and with the visuals in the sidebar, so they have a better understanding of the data. Some things are not best represented on the map, and some things are. So being able to use those together has been really helpful for them. And like I said, we sent out a survey after the first round of user testing, and these are some of the results. We did like a Likert scale to gauge how useful the tool was, and then got some quotes from people. So, I'm not going to read them to you, but I posted the slides in the Slack channel. So if you're curious to see what type of feedback we got, it was really helpful to make sure that this is serving existing users and new users, and really set us up to build a successful user-friendly tool. So once that was done, we kind of kept going in the design process, and I'll show you where we ended up with the tool that is live on the site today. So the simplest function of this map is to view a single variable aggregated to one of many available census geographies, as Eric mentioned. We have census shapes for 2010 and 2020, as some data is available for 2010 or 2020, depending on what vintage it is. We use a custom monochrome base map designed in Mapbox to give added context to the choropleth data, so you'll see like place labels and things like that here. Each variable on this map is in one of 5 buckets, ranging from a light to a dark blue, so a monochrome color palette, which you can see reflected also in the histogram on the left side. In the California-only version, we used a continuous color palette, and that presents challenges comparing, 2 very similar colors to each other. So we decided to go with a discrete color palette instead, and we think this makes it a lot more legible. But where we think this map really shines is comparing 2 variables to each other, so creating a bivariate choropleth map. Both with the map and the visualizations in the sidebar together, you can really explore and understand the relationship between the 2 variables you have selected. So here, geographies where both variables have high values are green, and if they're both low values, they're light gray. And then there are 23 other options somewhere in between. So it's like this 5x5 grid of blue and yellow make green when they go together. As we did for instead of using infinite colors like we did in the previous version, which was a similar color palette, this 25 colors only makes it a lot easier to read the map. And in this view, you can also see there's a scatter plot in addition to the histograms that were in the univariate view. As you zoom into the map, the geographies by default will change. So we're starting with counties at the national level. And if you zoom in, it will eventually switch to census tracts. This tested really well with our users. They really like seeing more granular data where it made sense to see more granular data. But if you always wanted to look at census tracts, you could do that. You could select it from the dropdown. Or if you always want to look at states or counties or zip codes or whatever it might be, you have a little flexibility there. A major use for the tool is data exploration. So we wanted to make it easy for users to find different variables. So you can search, you can type, with a keyword and find data, one of the 120 plus variables that are in this list via search. You could use the categories like Eric mentioned earlier, or these tags to find things that maybe you don't know the right term to search for. You could do it this way instead, or all three together, so some combination of those things. You can filter to a single state or several states if you're interested in that. A lot of our users are like state officials or regional officials that are interested in only in this case, Washington instead of the entire country. So you can do that in that filter on the top left corner. And then all of the histograms in the scatter plot redraw to only reflect the data that you're looking at. So you'll see the distribution just for that area. As a cartographer and geographer myself, it bothers me when I can't see all of the data at one time. So with our map, you're able to see the contiguous United States and Puerto Rico and Alaska and Hawaii all at once with these inset maps in the corner. This is often like a missing feature for some reason in map tools, so we wanted to make sure to include that. And then if you want to navigate to one of those non-contiguous areas, you can do that easily with the inset, clicking that little arrow in the corner, and it'll fly you to Alaska and then fly you back to the contiguous United States. If you're interested in seeing like a specific subset of data, so for example, we work with a lot of people in San Francisco if they want to see the Bay Area and how that compares to California or to the national data, you can select those areas on the map either by drawing a shape or by individually selecting them. And you'll see the values on the left in orange are the averages for the selection that you've made. So in this example, the selected counties in Alaska have a lower than average level of extremely low income households. So it's interesting to see that data summarized for you right there. Of course, beyond exploring and understanding the data in the tool, a lot of people want to extract this data and use it in their own tool in desktop GIS or statistical software or in some other way. So you can export the selection that you have or an entire data set as a CSV easily with this tool. Also, a lot of our users do presentations. They talk at conferences like this, and they'll talk about a specific health concern or outcome in a certain place. So being able to just quickly grab a screenshot is really nice and not have a bunch of UI in it that you're not interested in including. Often they want to annotate things themselves. But then some people really want all of that UI that we designed in there. So we found that having both options is really nice. It's good to see the source information, the histograms just right there already designed so you don't have to regenerate that yourself. And it includes the insets or it doesn't if you remove them, either way. And now Eric is going to get into some of the details of how we did some of these visualizations. So I'll hand it back to him.
Thank you. So I'll talk through the maps for the single variable choropleths. These are usually 5 bins. Depends on the data set, but usually 5. Depending on the data set, also, we will dynamically determine the bins using, we use CK-means for that, doing that. And as Kelsey mentioned, rather than the linear interpolation we were doing before, we find this to be a lot more legible, especially based on user feedback. Similarly, with bivariate choropleths, we're doing the same process to determine the number of bins and just finding all the combinations of those bins. So we have to dynamically generate the bins sometimes, and we use darken blending to do that. And I wanted to talk through some of the supplementary visualizations that we use. They do quite a lot. They're nicely integrated with the map, I believe. So starting with the histograms for each variable, you can see at the most basic level, you want the histogram to help users determine what the concentration of the data looks like. So we do that. But they're also acting as the map legend when you're looking at one variable. There's not any other indication of what the map bins are. And we provides some affordances for interactivity with both the histogram and the map. So in the middle here, the user is hovering over one of the map features, and we're showing you, as you hover, where that feature is in the histogram. And on the other side, if you mouse over some part of the histogram, you'll highlight that bin. So it's a little bit hard to see here because we don't have a mouse cursor, but there's a mouse cursor over the middle bin there. So we're showing you the range of those values and also highlighting them on the map. Coming to this histogram, I'm not sure if you noticed, but some of the bars on the histogram are not all one color. And that's because we wanted to ensure that we were doing an equal interval histogram bar situation, but also showing you what the map classes were. But the map classes never lined up with the bars themselves. We went through a number of iterations trying to find a nice way to do this. We're happy with this, this split bar effect, but we have a couple other ways we tried to do this, each of which have their trade-offs. In the top left, for example, that's not really a histogram, it's a bar chart. And then the top middle, we're just completely making up the bars sometimes just to make it look nice. For some reason, the researchers we worked with were not happy with that solution. And here, I still kind of have a soft spot for this one in the top right, where we're not really styling the bars, but we're showing you the map classes underneath. And then here in the bottom right is where we're actually splitting the bars vertically so that you can still see the range of the map bins alongside the bars. It's interesting, but the winner for us was the horizontal split. And really similarly, the scatter plots work like a map legend when you're looking at two variables at once. They also, in the middle there, someone is mousing over one of the features. We show you exactly where that is, so you can see that at a glance. And then finally, you can draw a rectangle on that scatter plot, and it's going to highlight those features on the map. It looks something like this when you do that. And the other visualization, which is more of a summary. Because the grid cells are all the same size here, I think it works a little bit better as a map legend than the scatter plot does. And also we have these circles within it that are proportional based on the number of features that are in each of those cells. So you can still see the trends in the data. When you hover over a map feature, it's indicated which cell that feature is in, and vice versa. When you hover over one of these cells, you're going to highlight that whole, all those features on the map, like this. You also get like this quick little summary of what the ranges for that for those values are within that cell. Really briefly, I wanted to mention some of the implementation details here. So for the California-only Health Atlas, we were dealing with just like one big CSV with all the census tracts and all the variables. That was not tenable for the national level, as you might imagine. We went for something called hive partitioning, where you actually split out the data, one large table, split it out into many smaller tables based on some key columns. So that looks something like this. We used some libraries called polars and duckdb in Python, but you end up with a bunch of different files organized in a file system like this, which helped us retain the static hosting that we wanted to use. You can imagine, as long as you have those three pieces of information, you can always reliably get the data that you need. And the data's loaded on demand as needed. the nice thing about loading all the values at once is you can actually make those visualizations we were talking about, the histograms and scatter plots. Not really possible if the data is baked into vector tiles, because you'd have to ask for all of the values anyway. So really, the vector tiles we're dealing with are pretty sparse. They just have the GeoID, and we do these ugly match expressions to style the map that work. Next steps. The Health Atlas currently has climate change variables for California that we just added. We're looking forward to expanding that nationally. So that's what's coming next. And again, that's at healthatlas.ucsf.edu. Thank you all.